Hey all you creative cellists out there, what is good? Jacob back here with you for another edition of the Improvisors Guide to the Cello, and today I'm going to be showing you the top 5 improvisation games every music teacher needs to know. Now, even though the Improvisors Guide website isn't for beginners, the vast majority of you that are on the site are teaching in some form, whether it be college teaching, or maybe you're an orchestra director, or maybe you just have a small private studio. But whatever the case, a lot of you have been reaching out to me for some resources and inspiration, especially during this crazy pandemic. Each of the simple lessons I'm about to show you will require no more than about 5 minutes of class or lesson time, can be done without any setup, and best of all, can be taught to students of all ages and ability levels, irregardless of whether you or they have any improvisation experience whatsoever. And be sure to stick around at the end of each lesson, where I'll be going through class discussion notes as well as fine points for the teacher, including modification ideas for group versus private instruction. Our first game is called scripting. And I often like to start this by speaking gibberish to the students, stringing together a few random words that may make sense by themselves but don't belong together. Like, why are purple good? Or over apple see-through. After a few seconds, there'll be an obvious look of confusion on your student's face. Explain to them that each of the words they heard may have made complete sense unto themselves, but without a context, without something unifying all of it, it becomes random gibberish. In the same way, good music that's improvised or composed has something unifying the notes and rhythms, bringing them together, a central idea that we'll call a script. Now, every good script has a basic storyline where we build toward something happening, we can call it a high point, and then it happens and the story finishes. As most students tend to be visual learners these days, I like to introduce this by drawing a simple shape for them, like this. Be sure to pace the students through the form as musically as you can. In a 12-bar blues, for example, guiding them to the apex around the 8th or 9th bar, and then giving them 2 or 3 bars to come down and lose steam again. Now bring it down. Good. Now, for those of you that are new to backing tracks, this can be performed with literally any type of background, but it is good to have something playing, maybe from a Bluetooth speaker hooked up to your iPhone or laptop, because it frees you up to conduct, encourage, and just observe the class more. For beginners and basic situations, I like to use the 12-bar blues because the form is so intuitive and discernible, even for students that have no improvisation experience at all. But it can be as simple as finding a background track on YouTube, of which there are gajillions, or even a simple drum loop from GarageBand or Spotify will do. My favorite is the app iRealB because it's so versatile, but the options here are really plentiful and free. After completing the exercise, ask the students how they created the storyline and the script that you had given them. Was the increase in energy created by more intense rhythm, a change in bowing, adding more notes, going up higher on their instrument, or maybe some combination of all of those things? Now, be sure to remind the students that you didn't tell them specifically to play higher or faster or louder, but it happened naturally as a result of them telling their own musical story. And that's what music is all about. And if you're teaching this in a group setting, it's also good to point out that you noticed that each student used different elements to tell their own version of the script that you presented to them. If you've done any improvisation games with your students before, for example, playing a one-note solo or choosing a specific musical facet to emphasize, ask them how this experience felt different as they improvised. And did it feel different at all? And this is a great time in the conversation to tie a bow on this entire exercise by bringing the students back to your initial point about conversation. That improvising is really the same as speaking, in that we may not know how we're going to get to the end of our sentence, but we have a subject, we have a script. Now for this lesson, I'm incredibly indebted to the work of the great Martin Norgard, who is one of the few non-charlatan creative string teachers out there and a huge inspiration to me. Check out his books, The Jazz Fiddle Wizard and his amazing Gypsy Jazz book, both on Mel Bay. It's helpful to compare this lesson to a standard variant that may appear similar on the surface and that almost every teacher has attempted at one point or another. The old one-note solo or music is a choice lesson, where the teacher will ask the students to limit themselves to a single note or a single rhythm to allow them to focus on other aspects of music making, be it dynamics or articulation or different rhythms. But unfortunately, the simple act of choosing a category starts to intellectualize the process and get them out of that language part of their brain that real music comes from. And after all, modeling the intuitive process is the most important aspect of teaching improvisation, and I think is one of the things that makes bringing these improvisation games so valuable to a classroom, for example, where there isn't any other improvisation being taught, like an orchestra class where the students, many of whom don't have private instructors, are being brought up on the page from day one, which really limits that experience of what intuitive music making and simply responding to the music feels like. Improvisation games like this can help to bridge that gap if taught properly, and I think scripting is one of the best examples I can think of. Another thing I love about this lesson is it requires almost no modification to take it into a group class setting, except for a few standard instructions that I would generally give to any teacher in any situation that's working with this kind of material. For example, make sure, if possible, that you have all of the students do the exercise at the same time. I like to have fun with this when I'm doing clinics or teaching a group class and announce that what they're about to hear is going to be complete cacophony. In other words, it's going to sound awful. And because everyone is playing together, no one is going to hear you. That takes away the fear factor and possible embarrassment of not sounding good in front of their colleagues and gets everyone playing immediately. You obviously don't want students sitting around if possible, as everyone should be getting this experience, and when students are sitting idle, that really ruins the flow of their concentration in any classroom situation. And, as I mentioned before, and this definitely bears repeating, whether it's just open strings for a basic class or more advanced scale concepts, you do not want to have the students play anything that the weakest student can't perform at a high level right off the bat. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you're watching on YouTube and got to the end, you'd be a complete jerk to not at least hit like and subscribe. It costs you nothing. And for more improvising games and so much more content, come join us at the improvisarsguide.com, the first and best community for creative cellists online. See you there.